We'll now turn our focus to technology's biggest game changers, the ones that are proving to disrupt societies, security, and economies all around the world. For this session, I'd like to invite the moderator, Jacqueline Tame, the Director of Government Relations at PsiQuantum, to the stage. I'd also like to welcome the panelists for this discussion. Ylli Bajraktari, the Chief Executive Officer of the Special Competitive Studies Project, Chang-Yune, the Deputy Minister of the Office of R&D Policy at the Ministry of Science and ICT in the Republic of Korea. Dr. Kate Kitagawa, the Director of the Space Education Office at the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency. And David Waterhouse, the Managing Director and Co-founder of Hypersonix Launch Systems.
Good afternoon. I hope that everyone enjoyed this morning and lunch. I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you again to ASPE for hosting this really important summit. And thank you to my panelists and esteemed colleagues for being here to have this important discussion today. So we've heard from experts, right, throughout the morning on the geopolitical context that guides this moment in history. We've heard about the enormous opportunities that are being created by rapid advances in and the near ubiquity of many exquisite technologies and of many common technologies that have proven to have exquisite use cases. We've heard about catalysts that strategic alliances like AUKUS offer to drive creative new frameworks and paradigms for public-private partnerships. And what we're about to do with my esteemed colleagues up here is to discuss game-changing emerging technologies that are both disrupting in many cases and bolstering in others societies, security, and economies globally. I imagine, though I've not prepped this with my esteemed panelists up here, that we will talk about everything from advanced manufacturing to directed energy weapons to hypersonics to AI and quantum technologies. And given my moderator's prerogative, I just want to offer one thing before we launch into this discussion. We are all here, I would imagine, not because of a specific technology. And let me tell you what I mean by that. Though I am currently the Director of Government Affairs for PsiQuantum, and we are building what I believe to be an incredibly important technology, a quantum computer, fault-tolerant, error-corrected, utility-scale quantum computer. We are all here because we are humans and because of our human experience. And what I think that we often don't actually take into account and talk about enough in the context of these dialogues is the humans behind these technologies and the humans behind the decisions surrounding these technologies and the humans who will build and deploy and scale and decide about IP rights and acquisition of these technologies. It is, at this point, until we move into a very different, very autonomous world, it is humans who build. It is humans who use. It is humans who buy. It is humans who have motivations that are driving the way in which the technologies are developed, scaled, shared, or not. Human-generated incentive structures that are often misaligned between governments, industry, the private capital that's actually increasingly financing many of these emerging technologies. Human emotions that govern the risk tolerance, willingness to embrace and deploy and capitalize these technologies. And the reason that I wanted to highlight this is because of my own personal experience, the reason that I sit with you on this stage today, the reason that I joined PsiQuantum. I'm coming to this space after almost 20 years in the US federal government, mostly in the Department of Defense and the intelligence community. My most recent position, government position was helping to run DoD's Artificial Intelligence Center. It's where I met Ylli and many of you that are in the audience today. And what I realized in that capacity is that we have exquisite technologies. We have unbelievable commercial companies ranging from, your sort of anecdotal four people in a garage to multi-hundreds and thousand-person companies. And if we are not ready to adopt and deploy and scale these technologies in a meaningful way, if we have not fully examined the human emotions that actually govern these decisions and the human dynamics that impact these decisions, which is what my personal experience at that AI center was, then we're in a world of hurt. I wanted to transition from AI into quantum because I recognize that when quantum computers come online, and we've heard earlier this morning that that's going to be much sooner than I think people realize, if we are not fully prepared, if we have not done the sort of introspective analysis about the human-machine aspects of adoption and IP and acquisition of these technologies, the sharing, et cetera, then we'll not be able to actually take advantage of everything that they bring to bear and their game-changingness, if you will. So with that, I want to kick off this panel. I'm really, really excited to have each of you here with me on the stage. So we're going to start with sort of some opening questions, and one that's for each of you. We'll just do sort of a lightning round first. So Ylli, if you indulge me to go first. Can you please offer 2 to 3 emerging technologies that you personally consider strategic game changers right now?
Thanks, Jackie. And I want to thank ASPE for inviting me here to be on such a distinguished panel with my colleagues here, and to Justin for organizing a truly amazing dialogue here in Sydney. So I'll offer, my name is Ylli. I lead a special competitive studies project. Back in September, we published a report called Mid-Decade Challenges to Our National Competitiveness. And what we did in that report, we really looked at what are some of the key technologies that we gotta invest, double down, and stay ahead, because this is an evolving technology competition, as Eric mentioned and other panelists before us mentioned during the day. But what would be some of the technologies we really have to dominate between now and 2025 that would create the next generation of technologies after that? We came down to basically 3, to your question about identifying 2 or 3 technologies. And I'll provide rationale for all 3. I believe that the 3 technologies we really have to stay ahead and do everything possible to stay ahead are AI, chips, semiconductors, and advanced networks, or 5G, 6G, whatever you want to call it. And I'll provide the arguments for each one of them. When you look at how you build a digital ecosystem or the digital infrastructure, you need all these 3 core elements for you to create that digital society that would benefit then our economy and ultimately our national security. And when we looked at the last couple of years, in 5G, we discussed that. Andrew Scheer mentioned how we got really close to losing that competition on 5G. I think the jury's still out there whether or not we are ahead or we're still lagging behind. But I think there was a wake-up call in how, as the United States, with the best universities, best companies, the most talented people, we call it you can get 5G'd in that space by China, because they had a technology, they had a capability that was fully subsidized and deployed globally. And so how do we stay ahead in terms of 5G or these advanced communication network really is a question we have to answer for our society, because ultimately the core infrastructure we got to build has to rely on those advanced networks. On semiconductors, I think this is the most discussed issue for the last 3 years. We got really close in that space too, but as I've said it many, many times again, United States would have not been ahead in terms of semiconductor advanced manufacturing if it wasn't for our closest allies and partners. And you all well know, if it wasn't for TSMC and ASML, we would have not been at the core lead on these advanced chips. I think Congress and the White House rightfully understood the importance of staying ahead in this competition. We doubled down with the CHIPS Act. I think our allies and partners are following suit. And this required a 2-step approach. One is, how do we protect our core technologies? And I think the export controls that the White House put in place that our closest allies and partners followed suit. And then also promoting and investing our core capabilities domestically, I think, is an answer to how we need to stay ahead on the semiconductor piece. And on AI, I led the National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence that Congress created about 4 years ago. in the United States. And honestly, the competition between United States and China is really a close call in who leads where or in what pieces of AI. I think what has happened since November with the release of ChatGPT and GPT-4 and all these large language models really gives me assurances that United States or the Western companies are still ahead. But China is really not far behind because they have doubled down, they have invested a lot in all aspects of the AI stack, people, companies, platforms, algorithms, etc. And so to summarize your questions, Jackie, I really believe between now and 2025, we have to make sure that on all these three core technologies, we are ahead because these will create the baseline foundation for us to create the next generation of technologies, like you mentioned, quantum and biotech and smart manufacturing, all necessary for our society and our economy and ultimately national security.
Perfect, thank you. So just to confuse the AI that would be governing this panel, I'm going to go to Deputy Minister Lee next. Do you agree with the three technologies that Ylli has offered, or do you have others that you believe are game-changing?
네, 감사합니다, Jacqueline.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline.
제가 오늘 두 가지 전략 기술을 좀 말씀을 드리려고 생각을 했었어요.
I was thinking about talking about two strategic, critical technologies.
한 가지는 이제 일리가 말씀하신 AI였고요.
One was AI, Ylli just touched on.
두 번째는 양자 과학 기술을 말씀을 드리고자 했습니다.
The second one, I was thinking about talking about the quantum technology.
뭐 초거대 AI는 일리께서 말씀하신 것처럼 다양하게 산업적으로 응용할 수 있는 가능성이 있고 또 이제 안보적으로도 활용 가치가 높은 기술로 평가를 받고 있습니다.
Well, as Ylli mentioned, AI has the capability to be used for industrial purposes, but also has the potential to be used for security as well.
이미 우리가 일상생활에서 활용을 하고 있듯이 챗GPT와 같은 AI 같은 경우에는 비용은 낮추고 효율성은 높이고 그리고 편리하게 사용할 수 있다라는 관점에서 보면 저희들이 아마 2010년대 아이폰이 도입이 되면서 뭐 새로운 생활 환경이 바뀌었고 또 이제 여러 가지 애플리케이션 앱을 통해서 산업 생태계가 큰 변화를 이루어왔던 부분들을 생각할 수 있을 것 같습니다.
Well, things like ChatGPT have reduced the cost significantly, but also boosted efficiency and also made our life a lot more convenient. And it's just like the arrival of the iPhone back in 2010, which really made such a difference to our daily lives, and as well as other apps that have been used across the industry.
물론 AI의 활용과 관련해서는 안전성과 신뢰성을 담보할 수 있는 국제적인 규범에 대한 논의도 착실하게 준비를 해야 된다고 생각합니다.
But when it comes to AI, I believe that we really need to have a constructive talk on establishing a norm that ensures this safety and reliability.
두 번째로 말씀드릴 게 양자과학 기술입니다.
The second one I want to talk about is a quantum technology.
앞서 말씀드린 인공지능도 결국은 데이터와 초고속 연산 능력을 기반을 하고 있죠.
As I mentioned, the AI that I mentioned earlier is also based on the super speed data processing and computation.
만약에 저희들이 지금 현재 컴퓨팅 기술 한계를 극복할 수 있다고 한다면 신약 개발이나 금융, 서비스 다양한 산업 분야에서 활용이 될 가능성이 있습니다.
And if we could possibly enhance our computational capability, that capability could be used for multiple applications, such as developing new medicine or finance as well.
아울러서 국가안보 관점에서도 양자 기술은 보안을 강화하는 측면이 있고 암호 체계를 무력화할 수 있는 양면성이 있기 때문에 저희들이 조심해야 될 것 같습니다.
And also the quantum technology has the dual possibility of increase the security. At the same time, it can also be used to demolish the security. So that is decrypting. So we have to be careful on this front.
Perfect. Thank you, Deputy Minister. David, your thoughts?
Well, I'm going to say Hypersonix, of course. Sorry. Okay. Well, let me say it again. Hypersonix, and the funny thing is, Hypersonix it's more than just about a defence technology. You think about the efficiency it could drive for the global economy. You know, Sydney to London, 1.5 hours, green, changing. You know, all the emissions we have from air transport, etc. But it's an enabling technology, and history shows one thing: speed matters. So taking a step back from that, what are the technologies we require to make hypersonics work? So yes, AI, that's part of it. We're traveling so fast, human flight is kind of hard to control. Modern manufacturing, so making it affordable at scale, so that's everything from 3D printing, alloys, high temperature composites, and it's a fundamental change to the way we use the atmosphere, if that makes sense. Now, yes, of late we've had this great marketing from a couple of people, okay, Putin and Xi. So now everyone knows what hypersonics is. 3 years ago, hardly anybody had heard of it, and those that did thought it was 10, 20 years away. So we've got to play catch up now. You know, Russia and China are probably 3 to 5 years ahead of where we are today. But it's a great opportunity. If we were trying to do this 5 years ago, it would have been just about impossible. But what's happened now, we have the computing power to do the modeling, we have commercially available materials, we can leverage the existing hydrogen economy for the systems and everything else and the infrastructure. So it's a great opportunity. And I think we're kind of a little great little case study on how small business can actually feed into the bigger industrial complex and provide not just competitive technologies, but provide competitive defense technologies and complement what the primes are doing in terms of exquisite engineering with something that's cheap, cheerful, and works, and effective. So it's a different way of solving the problem. And I think where small business has a role going forward in the development of technologies is by innovating rapidly and quickly. And if you have a look, you know, this is one of the things we haven't really talked about. You know, it's great, I think, from the top down, everything's moving in the right direction, but we're lacking the sense of urgency. You know, we're talking about 10, 20-year programs. But when we have a look at, and I'm jumping all over the place, but if you look at AUKUS, you know, Pillar 1's great, strategic, it's something we need. Pillar 2, though, is the technologies we can field in the next 5 years. And the challenge, I think, for all of us is what can we field in the next 2 years? And how are we going to do that? And I think that requires, you know, use of small business in, you know, driving that technology quickly as part of that ecosystem. And I think, you know, this is that generational opportunity. You know, if you go back 5 years ago, if you're going to provide in defense, work through a prime, 5-year sales cycle, yeah, it's pretty hard for small startups. These days now, we have institutions like the DIU that are prepared to work with small startups without having to go through that prime to deliver a service. And that's really, really important. That'll enable the introduction of new technologies. So when you say new technologies, it's not the technologies, it's also the process that we field those technologies. And I think that's really important.
Absolutely, thank you. And Kate, just to round out the panel's comments on game-changing technologies, and then we have a million places that we can go from here.
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Kate Kitagawa, Director of Space Education Office at JAXA, Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency. So it's excellent that we all hope, you know, just really agree to talk about, like, you know, this game-changing technology, especially on AI and, like, you know, time-wise, how we do about this. And from my perspective, in the fields of education, it's really an everyday challenge, like, you know, how we actually associate the young ones. So it has to go, like, you know, like beyond like what we concern now. Like, what are they seeing now to the 20 years later? As you say, like, it's a sense of urgency for now, and also, like, you know, what to build in the long-term process, as you said. And of course, they are living in this world of, like, you know, in one country, but also, like, you know, living as a citizen of the earth. So as you said about the security, I think it's really important for them to have a grasp of it since they're young age. So for me, the game-changing technologies are actually two. So one is a VR, so virtual reality. So for students who study at school, they now have those tablets, right? So usually they provide, and also like in many countries now that they're implementing or encouraging the students to make use of it since they were really young, like 6 years old. And what they do is that they usually study as like an iPad or those type of tablet things, and then just self-study. And first installment of digital technology is just to create the self-study materials. But now, VR and AR. What they think about from what they're learning has started to change very quickly. So this VR and AR on top of what they have on the digital device, I think that's something that I feel as a huge game changer. And like why we think about the next generation, like, we just don't care. We care about like, how they grow up, but how they imagine their future to be. That's why the virtual reality and augmented reality are critically important. And then like they used to do like hands-on activities. So many of you know like rockets, like water rockets, maybe you or your kids and many parents and grandparents, we know like basics of like how to play with those materials like in water rockets. That's how they used to play with space. But now they started to have like more advanced technologies available for them in their like high school years. So for example, nanosatellites. They used to be really difficult to shoot that real rocket, but nanosatellites, those really small ones, they started to create it in like high school years. And then that will be a game changer for them. Like what they can do is quite different from what they used to do. And now the actual real game changer of the nanosatellites are that it's not just the only one that can capture the person's idea, but by having the formation of many nanosatellites, they can do more. So now what they think about is not just to materialize their idea, making one nanosatellites, but they think about cooperation. And then that's an actual game changer for me to observe. So those are the two main things that I would like to chip in, is, on top of what has been discussed brilliantly by my colleagues here.
Yeah, I mean, I love the diversity of the lenses through which we're coming at this question, right? And I think that just kind of underpins the need to continuously have different stakeholders thinking about these questions from those different lenses. So to that end, I'm going to sort of combine some of the questions that I originally was going to ask, just because we delved a little bit deep into some of these answers. When you think, and Deputy Minister Lee, I'm going to start with you. When you think about who is primarily developing these game-changing technologies, is it, are you seeing government sort of taking the lead? Are you seeing commercial industry? What type of commercial industry, if so, taking that lead? And then I'm going to come to some of the other panelists here about sort of the balance between the government and commercial and private capital aspects of this.
제클린, 이 질문에 대해서는 한국적인 상황을 염두에 두고 들어주셨으면 좋겠어요.
So, Jacqueline, I think it would be nice, it would be good if you could just hear my response to this question, considering the Korean, particularly specific Korean situation.
한국의 과학기술 정책은 기본적으로 정부가 경쟁 단계 시장에 개입하지 않는다는 것입니다.
So the South Korean policy on science and technology is the government doesn't interfere with the early stage of this science and technology development.
정부의 역할은 기초연구나 원천 기술을 확보하는 데 투자를 하고 그리고 민간이 투자를 할 수 있도록 환경을 조성하는 데 중점을 두고 있습니다.
So our view is that the government's role is to support the basic research and also the fundamental technology and creating such an environment where these things can flourish.
저희들이 생각하기엔 이러한 정부 정책들이 민간의 기술 역량을 고도화시키는 데 크게 역할을 했다라고 저희들은 생각하고 있어요.
we believe this kind of stance that the government has taken has contributed a lot to the enormous development in the private sector in terms of developing these research and technologies.
이러한 그 정부 정책은 전략 기술을 확보하는 데도 공이 같이 적용이 된다고 생각을 합니다.
This kind of policy, I believe, applies to securing critical technology as well.
예를 들어서 아까 율리께서 그 게임 체인저로 말씀하신 반도체라든가 디스플레이라든가 2차 전지라든가 이런 부분은 이미 시장이 고도화되어 있는 상황이기 때문에 민간의 역할이 상당히 중요합니다.
As Ylli touched on earlier, the areas such as semiconductor, display, and the secondary battery, the market for these technologies have been well developed. So I believe it's the private sector that has a bigger play to roll.
아울러서 이제 한국 기업들이 디지털 혁신 역량이 상당히 높은 수준이고 그렇기 때문에 인공지능이라든가 차세대 네트워크라든가 이런 부분에 대한 투자도 민간 중심으로 이루어지고 있습니다.
And also the South Korean companies that are specializing in digital technology, they are quite well advanced. So when it comes to AI and also the next generation network system, the private sector is a lot more active in these areas.
하지만 첨단 바이오나 우주나 아니면 수소 제조 이런 부분은 사실은 아직까지는 시장이 형성이 되어 있지 않은 그런 단계에 있기 때문에 정부와 민간이 같이 파트너십을 형성해서 투자를 하고 있습니다.
But when it comes to aerospace, hydrogen, advanced biotech, and manufacturing, the market is yet to be formed fully. So the government and the private sector are working together in these particular areas.
예를 들어서 우주 부분을 좀 더 사례를 말씀을 드리겠습니다.
Yeah, if I can just elaborate a little bit more on the aerospace, just to give you an idea.
작년에 저희들이 독자적으로 우주 발사체를 발사하는데 드디어 성공을 했고요.
Last year, for the first time in history, we succeeded in the developing the space launch on our own.
그동안 저희는 발사체 시장에서 민간 기업이 역할을 할 수 있을 거다라고 생각하지 않았습니다.
So until that moment, we didn't think that the private sector will be able to play in the space launch system.
하지만 최근에는 민간 기업들이 하이브리드형 소형 액체 발사체를 개발하고 있는 민간 기업들이 발생하고 있습니다.
But however, we have more private companies that are developing hybrid and small liquid launching systems.
물론 이런 환경은 저희들이 위성 시장이 대형에서 소형으로 그리고 위성 자산의 활용을 중심으로 한 부가가치 정보를 생산하는 것 중심으로 시장이 재편이 되고 있기 때문입니다.
Of course, this is happening because the satellite is now becoming smaller, is transitioning from a large-scale satellite to a smaller scale, and then also the market is focusing on these added values of these particular products.
그렇기 때문에 우주 분야에서의 정부 정책도 민간 기업들이 다양한 시도를 할 수 있게 대형 발사 인프라를 조성한다든가 아니면 안전성에 관한 부분들을 컨설팅한다라든가 이런 부분들을 저희들이 집중을 하고 있습니다.
That's why the government is focusing on creating an infrastructure and also consulting on the boosting the safety of this space technology.
Perfect. So I love where you're bringing us because where this sort of line of questioning has come is to the evolution of how we sort of traditionally think about, you know, where government's leading in technology development, where the commercial sector is leading. Ylli and David, if you don't mind, can you sort of speak, given your respective hats, currently industry and Ylli's sort of like looking at industry and government writ large together, both through your NSCAI hat and now your SCSP hat. Is this balance, is this sort of shifting balance between sort of investment and especially in the areas of technologies that are not fully known, understood, mature online, is that balance kind of working at this point? Are we seeing the right levels of engagement, investment, sort of leadership, thought leadership from either from the government perspective or the industry perspective? Where are we experiencing real challenges?
I'll start. So I would argue, Jackie, that there are two factors that have changed in the last couple of years. Number one is I think the innovation ecosystem has changed. I think in the first panel really highlighted, post-World War II, government being in charge of that innovation ecosystem, and then working together with the private sector and academia to come up with these groundbreaking technologies that came from government labs and then they were scaled through private sector. I would argue that after Cold War, the private sector investment kicked in with basic R&D, and the government really slowed down in terms of incentivizing all these innovative solutions. So I think that's one factor that has changed over time. We make this argument in the fall report that we are now in this new geometry of innovation in which you no longer have just three actors, private sector, academia, and government, but you have the VCs and the banks and all other many players that are now involved in this ecosystem. So we got to change too, and we got to be adaptable to that. I think the second factor that has changed in the last couple of years is the geopolitical competition that has dominated this conversation today, in which we're facing a competitor that has a civil fusion, that is completely differently organized, dedicates different resources at massive scale, and has a completely different intent of what they want to do with these technologies. So I would say in the 2020s, we have to come up with a new public-private model in how we bring private sector and government closely together. On our system, as you know, Jackie, we have a lot of impediments on bringing these two sectors together. Sometimes these reasons are justifiably so because of legal, ethical, and other reasons. But I think we have built so many barriers between these two communities that I think if we want to exceed in this competition, we have to find ways in how you bring these communities together, especially small, medium-sized companies that are offering these groundbreaking technology solutions to the forefront, and have government really double down on providing that risk bind down the risk for these companies to really excel. And then on the second piece is how we can get ourselves as democracies organized to confront a challenger like China, because I believe all of these conversations we have had so far is that everybody brings something to the table. And luckily, there are democracies that are represented at this table. So one country might be ahead in quantum, the other one might be ahead in bio, but how in totality we stay ahead in all these technologies. And I think an organizing principle that all the democracies have to figure out is how do we create a new strategic alliance framework around these technologies. We all know that after World War II, the nuclear weapons became the organizing principle. We created the NATO alliance, we created the nuclear deterrence in Europe. But if technology right now is happening outside of government labs, outside of government innovation system and ecosystem, how do then we create a new alliance framework where government can provide some kind of regulatory framework at the global level, while incentivizing technologies to excel and provide that benefit for all of us at the societal and economic level.
Amazing. David, given your recent experience, especially with your DIU grant.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about our personal journey. And again, we started off about 3 years ago as a deep tech company. The Australian market's been quite challenging, mainly because we're light industrial and defence, so that rules me out from an ESG and the various other investor portfolios. But Department of Industry was very supportive. We received a few grants from them, an ACA grant, MMI Defence grant, and a CRC grant. But really what we struggled with, those grants were great. They're all match funding, so we still had to find half the money. What we found, though, is looking at, and this is where I think it's important to see what works elsewhere in the world. Heidi Shue described it as the valley of death. TRL 5 to TRL 7, 8, 9. you know, and there's just a dearth of funding. It's very hard to get funding in that. And this is where the US model with DIU, Defense Innovation Unit, is really exciting. Basically, the idea is they give you 2 years to field a prototype. They've got a defense customer at the back of it. And from that flows orders. And I would much rather have orders than grants. You know, so I think, you know, there's a lot of lessons to be learned from that process. You know, Australia does really well at the low TRL stuff, TRL 1 to 3 in particular, 1 to 4. If you have a look at published papers, that side of things, we're literally top 5 in the OECD. But as you heard earlier today, when it comes to sophistication of manufacturing infrastructure, we're at 81 or somewhere. And I think it's all very well talking about the technology, but if you don't have the funding and finance model behind the execution of that technology, you're always going to fail. And again, time is right now. We have this generational opportunity where we're now finding as a small business, we can bring technology straight to the end user. Okay, and in our particular case, our first customer is probably going to be defense, even though we started off with a commercial view in mind. So I think there's a great opportunity there, and we're seeing some very positive moves. Certainly the Australian government, we've got this Reconstruction Development Fund just coming through. We've got the Strategic Defence Review as well. So we're looking at solving the problem in different ways. And again, I think that's a very positive thing, and that's a way where we can contribute not just to Australia, but to the global economy. And I think, you know, the other key takeaway I'd say is if you're going to have great tech, you've got to be globally relevant. You know, as a marketplace, Australia's too small. We're subscale. But we have in the past developed and delivered meaningful technology, and I think that's where there's a great opportunity at the moment.
That's great. So changing gears just slightly and sort of taking one more lens to look at this discussion through before we kind of go to some hopefully more tangible recommendations for the next few years, which is, I think, what we all kind of want to see. Kate, you are internationally renowned for being a staunch champion of the idea of passion without borders. Can you tell us a bit about why this is such an important concept, particularly when we're talking about cultivating and retaining the top talent required to develop these technologies and to be globally relevant?
Thank you. So just briefly, that before I came into this office for space education, I was working at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Japan and collaborating with World Bank. And also, I was a math historian and based at Oxford. And before that, I was teaching at Harvard for history. And the thing that I really noticed was that this young generation, like age of 20 to 24, they are interested in both. So one is the international cooperation, which I realized at working at the Foreign Ministry with the World Bank. And then at academia, that their ideas are so fascinating, and it's something that beyond, you know, teachers' imagination also. And those two things that I actually learn how to cross the borders from them. So that's why I really advocating passion without borders, and how the technologies will actually help to go further than what we expect them to do or what we ourselves, you know, expect to do. So those things, the idea of passion without borders. And now this generation around 20 to 24 years old, they are really not into the workforce yet, so that they are learning what you are thinking about from the government's point of view, from the industry's point of view, and also the policy. But also, like, you know, what they are really trying to do is to see like what they can offer to the even younger generations. And I think we can't really pass through that kind of, precious sort of gift that we've gotten in this society. And then that's why, like, the passion without border is now sort of the common sense for this generation, where, like, they can travel a little bit more now after the COVID age, and then they now try to utilize all the education and also technologies that they've acquired. So I think it's really critical for us to be more inclusive to those younger generations now than later. And that's something that I would like to keep, saying to the, the teachers, students, and also, people who I associate with. And, that's something that I would like to just add a comment on this concept of, passion without border. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you so much. So I think in order for hopefully the audience to have an opportunity to ask a few questions, I want to just ask one more kind of lightning round question to each of you. And this hopefully gets to, wrapping the discussion up in the bow of sort of tangible outcomes that we can work towards in the next, let's say, 24 months, right? And we can go sort of from my right to left, if you will. Can you talk about, just briefly, one issue, whether it be policy, regulatory, technical, cultural, that you think is critically important that we invest in or get right over the next 24 months with respect to ensuring the interoperability or ability to share these critical emerging technologies, these game changers that we've been talking about? We've talked a lot today about AUKUS, we've talked about other alliances. And so in order to ensure that level of interoperability and sharing, what do we need to focus on? What do we need to do in the next 24 months? Deputy Minister.
제클린 아시는지 모르겠지만 한국은 과학기술에 기반해서 산업 경제를 이루어 왔습니다.
Jacqueline, I'm not sure. You may know, but you may not. But Korea has developed its economy based on science and technology.
그 과정에서 한국 정부가 생각했던 거는 개방형 R&D 협력이 보다 효율적이다라는 그런 신념을 갖고 있습니다.
So through that process, the South Korean government was of the view that the open R&D policy is a lot more efficient.
하지만 이제 최근에 저희들이 국제적인 어떤 상황들을 보면 개방형 R&D가 갖고 있는 궁극적인 문제점에 봉착을 하고 있죠.
But if you look at the international affairs lately, that we have now faced the issues that the open R&D system is causing.
그동안 과거에는 저희들이 원한다면 가장 저렴한 가격으로 재화나 기술을 습득해서 우리가 원하는 혁신을 이루어 왔었습니다.
So in the past, if you wanted, we could obtain material and technology and then achieve outcomes that we wanted at the cheapest possible price.
하지만 이제는 우리가 필요로 하는 재화나 기술들을 사실은 편안하게 저희들이 조달할 수 있는 상황이 한계가 생겼죠.
But now we have come to a stage where we pretty much have hit the wall in terms of obtaining material and technology at the cheap prices when we want them.
그렇기 때문에 전략기술 부분에서도 우리가 신뢰할 수 있는 파트너 국가와의 공동 협력이 필요하다라고 생각을 합니다.
So that's why when it comes to the critical technologies, I think it is crucial for us to have this partnership, create partnership with the countries that we can rely on, we can trust.
그래서 제가 지적하고 싶은 부분이 바로 이 부분인데요.
So this is what I want to point out.
우리가 신뢰할 수 있는 파트너와의 협력을 촉진하기 위해서는 우리가 공동으로 투자하는 협력 성과에 대한 공유를 어떻게 할 것인가에 대한 논의가 좀 필요할 것 같습니다.
So to be able to build such a trusting relationship with our partner countries, I believe it's necessary to have a dialogue with those countries on how to share the outcomes of the common investment the countries involved in this will be doing.
기술적인 우위를 확보하는 것이 협력의 목적이라고 한다면 성과의 공유는 원천적으로 불가능하기 때문입니다.
See, if it is the sole goal of to dominate the our position in terms of technology, it will be ultimately impossible to create such a partnership. 제가 잘못했나요?
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, David.
I guess it could be a very long list, but if we're focusing on the things that are really tactical that government can help us on, I think it is all about how we share and sharing. One of the big issues you hear people talk about is ITAR. It's not so much ITAR itself, it's having that secure ability to securely share research work and developments and technology. And again, unfortunately, it's just geopolitical necessity at the moment. The US has got a great model where they use what they call SCIFs, which are these small containers you can jump in and securely work with defense. It'd be great if we could extend that model to the partners of AUKUS Plus, so we could easily share secure data and jointly develop the technology, knowing that it's secure. Again, as a small company, cyber is one of my biggest concerns. Takes a lot of money, takes a lot of time, and I'd rather be spending that on developing the technology.
Perfect. Kate.
Sure. I'd like to add two things. So one is obviously this, on this development of technology in the field of education, that I would like to focus more on optimization. So why we're developing more, or why are we using the technology? This really have to come down to how we relate to the technology and how to optimize it. So it's great to have more and more and faster and faster, but we probably have to take a moment in the next 24 months to really think about where we stand and how we use it and what is optimal about this technology. So that's one thing that I'd like to say. And second thing is that from, again, the fields of education, that I think the keyword education for all has to be spread. And this dialogue, as both of you said, cooperation, dialogues is a critical, important things for this discussion. I do agree that we really have to talk and then have this kind of atmosphere for intellectual playground to think about what can we do next. And education for all is a slogan in a sense that we're teaching kids, but we're not really teaching just kids, that we really have to approach all generations in all fields of technology and more to really understand each other so that we know what technology, what our extension of selves are. So I think this keyword of education for all really applies to many fields, especially in the fields of technology. So.
Excellent, thanks, Ylli.
So Jackie, I would say, when you read history books, you see people living in the middle of some kind of a industrial revolution. I think what we're going right now through with AI is probably being in the middle of that moment. If you look at just from November, what has happened with ChatGPT, I think in 3 months they've had up to 200 million subscribers to their service. And when you talk to Google people, they'll tell you it took Google Gmail 5 years to get to 200 million subscribers. So what is happening right now really is something of historical, I think, levels. I think how we embrace this moment is going to be determined for the next 2 years, because I think it's going to have an impact on the future of work, the future of education, and everything related to our economy and our society. I think this is going to move really fast. We are only seeing how fast this is moving for the last just couple of weeks. And I think when these technologies are really at that exponential drive, things move just faster and faster. So our ability as societies, as a government, to put some guardrails around these technologies will really be important in the next 2 years, because I think we're living the future as it is happening right now.
That is a lot of food for thought, I would say, from a very expert panel with varying backgrounds and varying perspectives. I wanted to leave a few moments at the end for any questions from audience members. Yes, for our panelists, please.
Well, good afternoon. What an amazing panel. Thank you. My name is Swapan Johri. I represent a company called HCL Tech. That's a global technology services company that, as we call it, supercharges progress for customers, people, planet, and the communities. At the heart of our success is basically building skills. And therefore, the question that comes to my mind, listening to these critical technologies, is what competencies you think should the human race focus on in the next few years?
Who wants to give it a shot?
I'll start. I mean, so I think we're entering really an age of human-machine teaming more and more. If you look at what OpenAI did is they already, before they launched the latest model, they have a contract with Khan Academy, which would enable the new generation of young people to work alongside these models. So I think how we get to that next stage, how we get comfortable, because it's going to be a cultural issue, it's going to be an issue of how we shift our educational system in working hand in hand with these systems to make humans better and more informed. I think that's going to be the next step of how you build a new generation of young people, leaders, or economists, and everything else.
Sure, thanks for the question. And of course, I'd like to emphasize more on the education. And I'd like to say this edutech is the real field that can grow and even faster than ever now. And the humans, it used to be like using the technology as a second self. And now it is actually the self or something even different, right? So how do we want to reflect that into the technology? And as I introduced this VR and how the human mind, like imagination, comes into play. And in this sort of technological development is really like something that we'd like to looking at like right now for the next generation to grow. So I really would like to add this field, the edutech, that I would really hope to hear from many of you in the audience to bring so many elements up front. Thanks.
Excellent. Okay, I see another question. Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon. Thank you for an excellent discussion. My name is Olivia Shen and I'm at the National Security College at the Australian National University. I'd like to pick up on a couple of the comments that have been made about the guardrails we need to put in place over the next couple of years. And Kate, also your comment about how technology is fusing with self. Could I get the panel's comments, given that AI and ChatGPT has been mentioned a few times already? Could I ask for the panel to give your reflections on the open letter that has been recently signed by members of, I guess, the effective altruism community and really led by the Future of Life Institute and signed by a number of AI researchers and technologists about calling for a moratorium on the further advances on AI experiments for 6 months? Just interested in your thoughts on that and whether that is actually useful or it may actually have a negative side effects.
You want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So great question. I think two things. Number one is I think we have to bring government into this conversation because I think what has happened has been solely in the private sector. And I think government is the only actor that can put some guardrails or regulation around this issue. I think stopping all these developments would probably not be a good idea just because like even if we stop and it would be a one-sided probably pause, I don't think other countries, specifically China and other countries would do the same thing. I mean, we have had the same conversation probably on other technologies when it comes to our legal, ethical norms and how we operate these technologies and how we develop them and deploy them versus how autocracies do it. So I just think we really need the government to start acting more proactively in this space, either through some kind of regulation, because even when discussing these kind of regulatory approaches, how do you do it when this technology is moving so fast? And so, but in absence of any kind of dialogue from this sector, I think we need some kind of a proactive approach in this space.
Anyone have any other thoughts on this particular question?
지금 질문에 대한 즉답을 말씀드릴 수는 없을 것 같고요.
I don't think I can give you an instant answer to that question.
하지만 한국 사회에서도 인공지능이 갖고 있는 위험성에 대한 어떤 사회적인 논의가 진행이 되고 있습니다.
However, I can just add that in the Korean society, there is a discussion happening about the danger that AI poses.
민간이 개발한 인공지능을 활용한 여러 가지 활용들이 산업화되고 있는 단계에 있기 때문에 민간들은 사실은 그 위험성에 대한 부분들을 먼저 이야기하고 있지는 않습니다.
So because the applications that have been developed using the AI are already being commercialized, so I would say the private sector isn't really talking about its danger at the moment.
하지만 정부 입장에서는 인공지능의 활용이 가져올 수 있는 개인정보의 오남용이나 아니면 신뢰할 수 있는 정보를 생산할 수 있는 가능성 이런 부분에 있어서는 저희들이 기술적인 진보와 함께 담론으로 한국 사회에서 끌어가고자 합니다.
But from the government's perspective, the issue of the abuse and misuse of privacy, private information, personal information, and also creating reliable information, this kind of thing, the government wants to create an environment where there will be a constructive discussion of these issues.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Any last questions from the audience? One more?
Good afternoon. My name is Sean Wilson from Scholl Group in the Brindabella Investment Syndicate. I have a question on technology investment for you. How can private sector investment be best harnessed to leverage the development of critical and emerging technologies? Thank you.
David?
Okay, and again, thanks for the question. I think we can learn from best practice all around the world. And again, I think US is a standout, as I've already mentioned, with Defence Innovation Unit. They claim for every $1 of seed money they put in, they actually get $200 of VC or private sector investment in, which is a great financial multiplier for the development of technology. Okay, in their case, in the defence sector. I think there are other great examples if you have a look at Singapore as well. Government's great at debt. You know, that's one of the things. They're not so good at picking winners, but great at debt. And so, you know, I think we need to look at things from a more sophisticated financial point of view in terms of risk return. I think the biggest help as a startup is orders. And again, this is where the DIU model is great. It's not a grant. It's actually something with, it's an order, it's revenue. And from that flows more revenue, and you've got a clear growth path. I think the other great thing about the US model there is DIU works as a lead investor. One of the things you struggle with deep technology or emerging tech is finding the local expert that can say, hey, this is going to work. By DIU fulfilling that role in the US, it makes it easier for the investment community to pile in as well. So I think, you know, there's some good opportunities there. I think, as I've said earlier, we are moving in the right direction. In Australia, it's great. We're starting from a very low base, so we're not worried about, you know, any cannibalization or anything like that. We have huge opportunities in the sector, and again, I think as well, if you have a look at this whole new space or new defense model, where small companies are getting access to global market opportunities, I think there are some great opportunities on the investment and financial side as well on the back of that.
Absolutely, and I'm very cognizant that we're at time for this panel. I don't know. You tell me. One more? Okay, one more.
I'm Amit Mehta. I represent the Australian Corporate Treasury Association, so we manage risk for companies. I'd like to take forward my friend Mr. Johari's comment about training. A lot of the focus on AI and the stuff that you've been talking about, the fear from a lot of people is more about losing their jobs. And rather than focusing on the high tech, which David has been doing, which I think would be the helpful thing to do you not think that our focus on AI is on the wrong side of things? We've got a world divided. The South, there are lots of people, you know, no jobs. The North, lack of people and a lot of money. And so I'm just wondering whether there is a mismatch here of actually thinking about this in a sensible way, and we talk about global standards. Actually, we think about the people and what we're actually achieving. And I think Kate has been focusing quite a lot on the education and the people aspect of this. So I would really like to get your views on some of this.
Good. On whether there's sort of a mismatch between the way that we're focused on
AI and how it grows. Yeah.
Exactly.
Sorry, it was a little bit far from the mic. So thank you for the questions and the clarification as well. Yes, I am really focusing on the human side of it, and also, big supporter of many fields that will eventually, come down to education. And my view on this AI, sort of how far are we taking on, is that this is the discussion is really ongoing now, and we would like to have many thoughts on it. But at the same time, we can't forget how useful it has been for the people, as you say, that that all on the globe to have this similar sort of education or the business opportunities or even cooperation, that AI to some extent will be greatly helpful for us to move forward. So I think we have to know that we are the decision makers, and whatever fields that we are from, that we probably acknowledge this fast and also precise developments that AI has been providing us. So I think it's now really the time to reflect on it, and then to how far that we can actually utilize the AI rather than being fearful, as you said. I think there are some more work to do together on a global scale, global challenges and in global education. I think those things that we could still use the good part of the AI right now. Thank you.
Perfect. Cognizant of time, I just want to thank my esteemed panelists, and thank you so much for the time. It was a pleasure to be here with you today.